So, Steve, we decided we're going to do a couple of nutrition episodes. And we came up with the idea last week that we're going to do the carnivore diet this week. And we're going to do vegan, plant-based diets next time we get on the call. Now, the interesting thing that I've noticed about this carnivore versus vegan debate, which is sort of like the two tribal camps of the extremes in the fitness industry, is that, sorry, vegans, but more of you are dicks than the carnivore people. If I ever get hate on a post, right, it's always vegans. You don't get the carnivores coming out and slamming people in the same way. Is it because they're more confident in their belief that they're right? What is your thought on the carnivore diet, and what's your thoughts on vegan tribalism?
Well, I do agree. The first thing a vegetarian tells you is that they're vegetarian. You know what? I just had a thought. It's probably because there is way more of them than people that are following the carnivore diet, right?
That could be very true. Yeah,
that could be the main thing. But yeah, I think. I mean, I've known a few people that have done the carnivore diet. Some of my clients, people that I know, and they always talk about it as well. But yeah, like, you know, obviously they're lacking some bloody vitamins and minerals in their brain, aren't they? You know what I mean? Both.
What, the vegans or the carnivores?
I'd say both, right?
Because this is the debate, right? Because I am by far not a blood work expert, right? But I've read my fair share of bloods. I know a little bit about them, and I've read bloods of people who eat no vegetables and people who eat purely vegetables. Yeah. And I've seen people like oh god, I'm going to butcher his name, but I can read it because I've got about 3 or 4 of his books on here. James DiNicolantonio. That is hard. That's hard to pronounce. And Jake Dolishal, who obviously read a lot of bloods. Both of them have come out saying, look, I have seen people with no nutrient deficiencies who eat no vegetables on carnivore diets, but you cannot be a vegan and not have nutrition deficiencies without supplementing.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's a really interesting thought of like probably the biggest debate of what's the better diet. And again, there's an element of individual, there's preference, there's lots of reasons why people go vegan or plant-based that are much more than health. But like the argument potentially here is that you could get all your nutrition without having vegetables. This is probably the big claim. But the disadvantage of this is, are we lacking something down the line from not having fiber for the next 20 years?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, from what I'm aware, I would say the 2 biggest things that I would be concerned about when it comes to that, following any sort of diet, but especially, you know, let's talk about the carnivore diet. The first one is, I think there would be some nutritional deficiencies created. I mean, I haven't read the work of those experts. Obviously, they know what they're talking about.
And neither of them are carnivore dieters. I might want to add, by the way, before people think there's elements of bias. Yeah. I didn't quote Sean Baker. I didn't quote Paul Saladino, even though he's not carnivore anymore. But, you know, even people like Mark Sisson and Thomas DeLauer, who aren't carnivore-based dieters. Mark Sisson said something really interesting the other day in an interview with Thomas DeLauer. He went, what he considers himself is carnivore adjacent. So he says the bulk of his diet is probably more animal-based diets. And then he'll if he goes out for dinner, he won't be as strict. I think that's really interesting. That's like taking the best bits without being tribal to a camp or a cause.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Like, this is the thing, like, you know, you've got people preaching. We're talking about carnivore diet, but I want to say any diet. You've got people that are preaching that they're following this diet, this carnivore diet, right? But really, if you're following a strict carnivore diet, that means you're not even having like cottage cheese or Greek yogurt. You know what I mean? You are strictly having only what you're having. You're having animal protein and organ meats, and you know, you're having liver. You're having what are you having? You're having beef, chicken.
Yeah, most of it you get people. Most of the carnivore dieters that I found, some of them are purely like red meat and organ meat, but I've a lot of them are red meat, organ meat, raw dairy, raw honey, like minimally processed, back to the source versions of animal life.
Wait, hold up. So they're allowed honey? A strict carnivore diet is allowed honey?
Not a complete strict carnivore diet, but here's the question, right? Because a lot of carnivore diets, and I will use Paul Saladino in this, who I actually really like, despite him getting probably the most hate of the carnivore community, but he is the one that's sort of gone back on it and shares his blood work on a regular basis and is happy to admit he's wrong. And, you know, like, yeah, he wants to debate these people. I have a lot of respect for Paul Saladino, but he was a very strict carnivore diet person, which helped him with a lot of issues that he had, like mental health, physical health, was it early onset arthritis? I could be wrong. Sorry, Paul, if I've got it wrong. But he solved that, and then he's now adding in like tons of carbohydrates. He has a bunch of fruit and a bunch of honey. He's still animal-based diet. He's still eating tons of veg, but he's still getting now he's fiber and his carbohydrates. And I think he's up to sometimes at 300 grams of carbs a day. He's just not doing it through Pop-Tarts and oats and sweet potatoes, you know? And so like this carnivore, and this is, I almost think the point I almost want to get from the show is that this carnivore diet, it has its place. It's not that it's not like people go, yes, if I said I'm going to have steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the Michaela Peterson diet for the rest of my life, there could potentially be flaws in this that we don't know. And the biggest problem with carnivore diet research is that there's no long-term studies. I looked before this show, and there's very little that's strictly on the carnivore diet at all, but everything is short-term. So we don't know if the lack of fiber will affect you in 40, 50 years. But what we are seeing is people, you know, coming back from terrible autoimmune conditions to have no symptoms, terrible mental health to have better symptoms. And we can talk about why I think that is a little bit later. We will. I think there's an element of like that, having that something like, okay, no one would say that someone with a nut allergy, well, just eat them. They're healthy, right? And they're in an anaphylactic shock, right? You wouldn't do that. We all understand that. But if someone's is sensitive to, their gut is sensitive to the toxins spraying the food, and the pesticides and the plant defense chemicals, right? Like, and it's causing them issues, remove them. No one could tell me Michaela Peterson, like, because people say this, oh, this is a stupid diet, what are you doing? She had like 2 hip replacements before she was like 17. She had crazy acne, massive depression, and now she's absolutely fine. So will it get her at 70? Maybe, but does she care if she can live from 30 to like, she might not have got to 70 the way she was going. So we can't necessarily say it's outright bad. I think we could look at this as if someone is in a bad position, maybe starting with a more animal-based diet, which is incredibly nutrient dense, which people forget. And then we can go, right, let's fix the gut whilst we take out all the stuff we don't agree with. And then let's see if we can add some stuff back in.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it has its place. And just going off some of the foods that, you know, this is one of the problems that you have with people that do or don't follow carnivore diet. They don't really truly understand it. Like, if they're following a properly strict carnivore diet, like, you know, you can't cook with ghee or, you know, avocado oils or olive oil or things like that, right? Because they're all plant-based, you know, so you have to use certain oils, maybe like lard or something. I ain't got a clue, but you there's a lot of foods that you cannot eat, you know what I mean? Well, whereas if you have that modified version, like a lot of these experts are doing, then you can have, you know, you can have your honey, you can have your squashes, your veggies, your you know, your berries, you know, things like that. But ultimately, the way I look at the carnivore diet is similar to you. It's just an elimination diet. And yes, there are a lot of people that are sensitive to certain fruits, mostly vegetables and you know, legumes and things like that. Unlucky for you, this is where the diet may help you. It doesn't mean you need to do it forever. That could literally be as minimal as 2 weeks or 6 weeks. And then you start reintroducing the food and testing it, see how your body reacts. If you're all good, continue introducing those foods that you like. It could be you know, a certain vegetable or a certain fruit or some honey or whatever you're going to have in this modified version and sustainable version of the carnivore diet, right?
Yeah. Yes, so, exactly. And I think when you look at some of the things that people have, it's like people are quick to bash things that, like, quick to bash a diet. And I had this thing the other day. We were talking about I'm doing a talk for a CP education, so they're like their PT qualification. And I was doing this pre-recorded talk, and I was thinking about dietary approaches. And I wasn't talking about carnivore here, but the same rule applies when I'm looking at, do you do macros versus meal plan versus intuitive eating? And I got to the precision nutrition, well, I've got it over there, book, portion control guide. You know, the 1 palm for girls, 2 palms for guys, etc., etc. And I went, Well, this is good for someone maybe coming off a diet who maybe doesn't want to track anymore, but needs to keep some of the good foundations of portion control in. Or it might be good for someone that's completely new, like hasn't even got an idea of portion control. But if you want fat loss, I said you probably have to accelerate this into something more like not strict, but something more controlled and trackable quickly, because you don't take into account oils and sauces and seasonings. And the thing, going back to the carnivore diet, so like I said, with portion control, 50 years ago, this is probably all you would have needed to do to lose weight, because you didn't have iced vanilla lattes with extra syrup. You didn't have all these hidden calories in all these foods. You didn't have all these additives, right? So having just managing portions of the food you're already having would be enough. But now it's not, because we add these calories that aren't equated for in this way of doing things. Same thing with a carnivore diet. Was it necessary to do a carnivore diet 50 years ago? From what we're like, one, the research is a number of years behind, right? We're looking at studies that probably gone in the 90s, early 2000s, maybe the 80s. So we don't necessarily, from what we're looking at, the need for something like this might not have been there. But now that 60% of American diet is now heavily processed for a lot of people, we see worse gut issues than ever before. I don't know about you, but I've seen way more food intolerances in the last 10 years than I ever did when I was a kid.
Yeah,
and
me too.
All that stuff makes you go, well, there is more need for these elimination, maybe more extreme diets as part of your diet, because people aren't as metabolically healthy as they used to be. Yeah. And I'll let you jump in on that bit.
No, all I was going to say, and that's it. Like, the thing is, this carnivore diet, it's still better than the typical Western diet, which is what you're alluding to. You know what I mean? It's still better than the typical Western diet. Obviously, long term, we don't know the effects on, digestive system, metabolic health. Gut microbiome is a big one as well. We're not getting any fiber. Like, is it going to affect the gut microbiome? Like, we know the research is very, very clear that, vegetables and fruits is where it needs to be for a good gut microbiome. Prebiotics, things like that, right?
I agree with that. The thing, going back to that same analogy of 50 years ago, like I saw something about people, the anti-gluten brigade, which I'm not in the anti-gluten bandwagon at all. But I do understand that a lot of people are intolerant to it. And it's a common inflammatory for a lot of people. And one of the things that they often say is that, well, yeah, like in theory, bread shouldn't cause you issues. Yes, we had bread back in, hundreds of years ago. It didn't cause anyone problems. But we're not looking at the same bread. Right, the way it's processed, the additives, things put into it. And I think nowadays, unfortunately, the same can be said for vegetables. We don't think about it because it's just veg, right? It's as organic and healthy as it can be. But we like so much stuff, toxic stuff is sprayed on it. And I recently in my functional nutrition course that I'm doing looked at the levels of toxicity in our daily lives. It is scary.
Yeah, I don't
like, it is scary of like how much our liver's getting a bashing. Now, most people's livers are resilient, but if we start adding in poor gut health, stress, poor sleep, this thing starts to tip away. And I think, like, I'm not saying that everyone should remove vegetables from the diet, but I'm saying that I'm not going to judge someone or tarnish them as wrong if they say, do you know what, every time I have fucking red cabbage or broccoli, I get the shits and I get acne. I'm like, do you know what? Let's take it out. Like, I'm looking at you as an individual, and I've seen enough people struggle with these things to understand that it's not as cut and dry as vegetables are healthy. Vegetables are healthy as long as you don't disagree with the stuff that's put on them. And maybe you start with organic. Maybe you start with moving away from pesticides, but it's a conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the best arguments back to those people that say, vegetables aren't bad, they're all good fruits. Well, then why does a FODMAP diet work well? Because people have issues with certain vegetables and fruits and foods, right? Again, it's an elimination diet, if anyone doesn't know that, of specific vegetables and fruits and stuff, and foods in general. But, like, people do have food intolerances. You know what I mean? A lot of people. And I was speaking to a client this morning, and she told me that she had to rush off. She was picking up some new dog food, getting delivered. I don't know. It was about fucking dog food. Her dog has allergies all in her ears. Now, I know my dog did as well. All right. My dog had allergies to grass and all different things, dust or whatever. And I was thinking, isn't that really funny? Like 20 years ago, maybe 10, I don't know. But the way I see it, I feel like the allergies in our pets at home have got worse as well. Dogs have to go on certain diets and all this stuff now, right? Maybe, or we're just more aware of it. And these
True.
dogs, these animals, these dogs, they don't have any stress. You know what I mean? They don't have these stresses that we have with work, finance, family. The only stress they have is environmental, right? So I'm thinking, yeah, like you're right. Like, you know, our fruits, our vegetables, they're not in good quality soil. We know that, you know, lots of rubber on the floor, the cambium affects, you know, zinc in the soil and all these things, and you know, pesticides on, you know, strawberries and peanuts. I think one of the most sprayed crops in the world, and almonds and walnuts and things like that. You know, we know these things are dangerous, but the park across the road, the council still spray a shit ton of glyphosate. The dogs are at that park every day, and you know, it's very dangerous for people. That, you know, it's banned in certain parts across the world because it's, you know how it can you know, cause cancers and loads of issues, right? This pesticide spray or herbicide spray or whatever it is, you know, to kill weeds, but it's so dangerous for us, but it's still getting sprayed. I was talking to someone a few months ago about the fluoride in our tap water. I said, oh, you know, use the filter or whatever. She said, oh, you know, it's nothing. The fluoride in our tap water is nothing. And I thought, yeah, it probably isn't, but let's have a look. And when, I don't know the numbers exactly, but basically when I checked, you can check in where I am, you can check the amount of fluoride that's in your local tap water. And when I checked it, I'm just giving you a random number, say it was 5. When I checked the levels of what is healthy and safe on the World Health Organization, it was less. They recommended less, but they're putting more in our tap water.
Yeah.
It was a lot more, I think.
And then you can look at like BPAs and plastics. And here's the interesting thing: when we look at studies in this is just, yeah, this adding up being the key thing I'm getting at here, right? Like when you look at the studies of, and again, I know I'm biased. I love a Coke Zero, and I'm not. If anyone tells me aspartame's dangerous, I'm going to find 30 studies that tell you it's not. But like when we look at some of these toxins, in particular things like our beauty products, our skin creams, our plastics, like particularly, you know, BPA and things like this, mercury and fish.
Yeah.
We often look at studies individual. Is the mercury found in tuna enough to cause issues in humans? And we go, no. And maybe, like some people would disagree with that. Maybe that's true. Is the fluoride in your tap water safe? Maybe. But then, okay, we've got the fluoride in your tap water. Then you're drinking from a plastic bottle. Then you're microwaving in a plastic container. Then you're putting on a toxic face cream. Then you're eating vegetables sprayed in pesticides. Then you've got... So yes, that's one is safe. But if all these interactions of all these safe levels of toxins add up to increasing your allostatic load, for people that don't know sciencey word for stress, toxic then it's not so healthy anymore.
And then we go and binge drink on the fucking weekend. And you know what I mean? Just more burden on the liver. And I just want to point that out. Like, I've seen one of the worst things that people can do is follow a specific diet, whether it's carnivore or whatever. Let's say carnivore. They follow this carnivore diet, and then when they do mess up, if they do, it's you know, it's for a couple of drinks. You know what I mean? You know, alcohol. I think that's probably one of the worst things you can do. Not because it's not because I don't want you to have fun and enjoy it, but it's probably not the best way to introduce something. You know, it's just, you know what I mean? So
that's the hard bit about elimination diets, though, right? Like, and I completely feel for somebody. Like, if you've got a severe gut issue, but let's say you've got Candida H. pylori, because this is a great example, right? These parasite overgrowths love carbohydrates and sugar, and then you go on an elimination diet that may limit those things, or at the very least take away in the processed sources that you like to enjoy them, and you have to then commit. Because as soon as you fall off that diet, like it's not just elimination diet is not like just a calorie controlled diet where you kind of go, oh, I'll slip off, but it's fine. It's 300 calories. I get back on it tomorrow or get back on it in the next meal. A elimination diet is like you're back to square one because you've now irritated the gut and it didn't have long enough to rest. It is brutal, but unfortunately, it's the bed you put yourself in. I've made the bed. I might as well lie in it sort of attitude. I know that sucks because I probably will have to do it. My gut's not as good as it used to be at some point. And like, I appreciate it's hard, but it is what it is. And go on.
No, I was just going to say about that, like, you know, that might set you back one day, and it could set you back one fucking month, right?
Yeah.
I've got a client who has diverticulitis,
Yeah.
and she could be set back for 2, 3, 4 weeks.
I know,
You
it's
know what I mean?
harsh.
2,
Yeah.
3, 4 weeks. So that's, you know, that's something to consider as well. Like with, you know, the carnivore diet, you know, like, you know, if you've got, you know, I'm pretty sure it's, you know, some people have that genetic factor of being, you know, potential to having, you know, diverticulitis, you know, which is a, you know, condition to do with the gut, right? Intestines or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had a client who's had it really bad. You know, he kind of fucking bleeds out. You know what I mean? Out of his fucking ass when he has his shit. You know what I mean?
Oof,
That's
yeah.
extreme. But like, I've seen people that have been like that. You know?
And this is why people become hardcore carnivore people, because they remove certain things from their diet, and all of a sudden these horrible symptoms go away. And they're like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books, a book called The Dark Side of Fat Loss by Sean Croxton. And it just goes into hormones. It's very a paleo-y type diet, right, in the whole. But why I like it, because it just goes into hormones in a very easy to understand way. Like if I'm wanting a holiday read and learn, I'll take that over something that's deep, like Cracking the Metabolic Code by James DeFal. I ain't taking it in on the beach, right?
Heavy.
So, but like he said, he often does people to do this diet, and he deliberately, after 30 days, on day 31, he tells them to eat whatever they want. And then by day 32, they're like, I don't want to do that ever again. I didn't realize how bad I felt before I started this until I came off this. Yeah. And this is so, like, before slamming someone who's got carnivore, hear their story, because I'll tell you what, again, I'll use Michaela Peterson as a great example. She does not want to go back to what it is. Does that mean, could she introduce foods now? Maybe, probably. But does she want to? Is it worth the risk for her? Probably not. And I again, a lot of people are going, I spoke to this from a very digestive and gut perspective, right? But I said at the start about you can get all the nutrients you need from a animal-based diet, which you can't from a vegan-based diet. And I want to bring this into play, because this is more for the plant-based dieters and the vegans here, because I want you to know what you could be lacking. Because the thing with there
over next week, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. You know, we're going to go into much more detail next week. But the big things with the carnivore diet is like things in red meat, like B vitamins, right? B vitamins, amongst many other things, they help run the Krebs cycle. They help your mitochondria produce ATP, produce energy. Super important. People go, well, I don't do loads of exercise. I don't need loads of ATP. Every movement you do requires ATP, right? Me to waggle this finger requires ATP. If you don't have ATP, you die, right? The better you can produce energy, the healthier we are. So that's going to be huge. We're going to have iron. So people often, like, especially women who go vegan, right? Women in general are more prone to anemia. Stick them on a plant-based diet, that's going to go up through the roof. We've got omega-3s. The current ratio of omega-3s to the anti-inflammatory fats found in fish, EPA and DHA, compared to our omega-6s, our pro-inflammatory, should be around 2 to 4 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3. We have about 25 to 1. So that balance is already in a bad space because of the processed, ultra-processed food and minimal oily fish and things like this we have. So, and then we make it worse by not consuming any, by going plant-based diets. We look at creatine monohydrate. If you're into your training, right? Like, you can get that through red meat, or you'd have to supplement it. There's a bunch of things. Zinc
as well. Creatine, very important for the brain as well.
And for ATP production, right?
Yeah.
Like zinc, right? Massive boost of our immune systems, amongst many other things. All these things you cannot get from a plant-based diet. These have to be solely things, huh?
And sexual function.
And well, damn true, right? So if all these things, if you are not, you can get them on a carnivore diet. You can't get them on a vegan diet. So if you're vegan listening to this to try and get a different perspective, and we've not convinced you to eat some meat, because why should we, right? Just make sure you're plugging those gaps with supplementation, because you will need it. And this is the thing that I also think about when people look at carnivore diets. In any diet, people look for the negatives. So I often see people go, let's say low carb versus low fat debate. When people talk about low carb or low fat, they go, low carb because this is the problem with carbs, or low fat because this is the problem with fats. And I like, well, no, let's start looking at this as a positive thing. If I have a high fat diet because I want to maybe address some of this inflammation and inflammatory fats, I want more fats in the diet to accomplish that. What does that mean? The diet is low carb, not because carbs are bad, but because I wanted more fats. If I've got an ultra marathon runner who likes to do 3-hour weight sessions daily, I'm probably going to do a higher carb diet because he needs to fuel that performance. And because of that, fats as a byproduct are low. Same thing with carnivore diets. We look at this as something that is like, this is bad. We haven't got all this stuff. Well, how many clients do you have that don't like vegetables? And instead of going, well, you should eat vegetables, they're good for you, you can go, well, do you like liver? Yeah, I like some liver. Okay, how about we use a lot of organ meat and we try and plug up some of these nutrition gaps? What veg do you like? We'll start with that. And as their taste change, as they diet, maybe we'll add in some more vegetables and fruit. Like, if you create solutions for people, you'll have better adherence to diets rather than being dogmatic among your belief of what's the right diet.
And that's it. Like, you know, you're talking about this carnivore diet in a sense to get someone into a position where they can introduce foods. And you know, like, for me, that's one of the biggest problems with any sort of diet like this. The carnivore diet is that it's extremely restrictive. You know, like, you can't even go to a party and have a drink or a birthday cake if you can do it properly. And we know for, say, you know, fat loss, weight loss, you know, the research is clear. The vast majority of people end up regressing back to their old eating habits and then putting that fucking weight back on. So we've got to follow something that's sustainable. But if we are going to follow the carnivore diet from an expert like yourself or anyone, we have to use it strategically and know when we're going to dip in and out of it and how long we're going to use it for, how we're going to introduce foods, what we're going to eat. Are we going to follow a modified version? Things like that, innit?
Yeah, but, and I want to caveat that term sustainable, right? Because I know you're not saying this, but I just think it's really important when people hear that term. It's like, yeah, I won't do that because it's too extreme. It's sustainable. Well, sustainability is built, not entitled to, right? Yeah. So because sustainability, when you come into, or a client of yours, if you're a coach, comes into you, sustainability is I want 3 pizzas a week. I want to take my delivery with my partner on Fridays, and I want to go get beers with the boys on Saturday and Sunday. I'm like, well, that's going to be really difficult to lose any weight on that, right? That is what you sustain right now. And if someone comes into that and also having autoimmune issues, gut issues, like parasite overgrowth, whatever, right? Well, okay, but like, if you want to give you that sustainable diet, your sustainable is going to be very unhealthy for you in 10 years. Well, how about we like go, right, this ain't sustainable. Maybe it doesn't, I'm not saying a carnivore approach, but how about we maybe have a more restrictive approach early on, solve some of these underlying issues, and then we go, right, after 4 or 5 weeks on this, you might not have the urge to have the 3 pizzas a week. So you go, oh, what do I want back? Well, I might like a glass of wine and a nice dinner with my partner on Saturday. Cool, let's do that. Like, and this is not a carnival thing, but it's just a general thing about the word sustainability. I hate it. I hate that term. I like it at the end of a diet when someone goes, right, how do we make this something you can do forever? But the end, like, the research is very clear, right? Quick weight loss often leads to better long-term adherence, which for some reason people think is the opposite, right? But people doing, I'll lose 1 pound a week and I'll get in shape in the next 14 years. No one sticks that out. No one sticks that out. So if we can get someone to have a good buy-in, get a good amount of weight loss, maybe solve some issues, maybe feel better. Like, imagine if you came in feeling like bloated and you had like diarrhea and you feel tired and fatigued all the time, and in 3 weeks I made you feel the best you've ever felt in your life, right? You are more likely to want to stick to that healthier diet, maybe with a few alterations down the line when the fat is off and you want to go, well, I also want to live my life, than if I just removed one thing at a time where you just felt still really crap for most of this time and I was depriving you of the foods gradually over time. So I think sustainability is something that is very much earned and comes after a point of not restriction. I'm not saying like you can't fit in a bit of, if you've not got any issues like what we spoke about with gut issues, you can't fit in some stuff you enjoy every week. But don't go into this with a false sense of security that you can try and have something that's immediately perfect. Because nothing's immediately perfect. Everything requires trial and error. The perfect training program. I hate fucking that exercise. I hate rear elevated split squats. Would you like it with a front elevated? That's not so bad. Cool, let's do that. Right? You like, eventually you find a program you like, and you find a meal plan you like, and you know, and might be more, for some people it might be more carnivore adjacent, lower, higher fat, lower carb, and other people might be higher carb, and a lot of people will be in the middle. But you need a place to start, and you kind of need to commit to that starting point to really know what you want to tweak. If every time you felt a little bit hungry, you ate something, how do you know what to tweak in the diet if you caved every time for sustainability?
Yeah. And yeah, totally. I completely agree. And going back to the carnivore specifically, I do think I think it's a great diet. You know what I mean? Especially for people who it's going to help cut certain foods out, whether it's alcohol or just highly processed foods and stuff like that, right? Because essentially, like we said, it's an elimination diet. But I've tried loads of different diets with loads of thousands of different people, and there isn't one unique thing about a particular diet, is there? Like, yes, they do have different effects, but I find that a lot of people that do follow the carnivore diet, one of the problems I have with it is that they just eat a lot of very fat rich meats, and bacon, sausages, lots of red meat and stuff like that. So they're not controlling their calories either. So then they run into other problems.
Yes. However, what I will say about this, because what are the common trends in all these different diets, right? The ones that tend to work, they make food more minimally processed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have higher protein, so they're more satiating, and they control the calories either consciously or unconsciously. So tracking is obviously conscious. Going to let's say a carnivore diet where you're consuming really nutrient dense, very satiating, high protein foods, because carnivore diets often are like 200, 300 grams of protein. It's like more protein than you ever need, but you're going to be very full. So yes, you're eating fattier cuts of meat, but I think it's very hard to overeat. Maybe like bacon and things like this if you're doing that. But if you're doing steaks and liver and liver, which is very lean, a little bit of white meat, it's very hard to overeat on a carnivore diet, which is the reason why a lot of people lose a lot of weight. Whereas in a vegan diet, and again, I know I'm sounding more pro carnivore than pro vegan here, but with a vegan diet, you're going to have a lot of people go to these protein, especially if they're not vegan for religious reasons or for the whole of their life, right? They've had a meat phase and they've now gone vegan because a Netflix documentary told them it was good for them. They then go for these fake, heavily processed meats, which aren't satiating, which then adds maybe to this gut issues that they're having. And then you cut out a bunch of nutrients. So at least the carnivore diet tends to be easier to manage your calories because of the sheer amount of protein in there. So that's the way I think. But again, I think another thing we haven't touched on, like the big argument with there's many reasons why someone would go vegan. And as you said, some of it could be religious reasons, which like all power to you, like we'll just plug those supplements in and you do you, right? There is going to be ethical reasons, which could be I don't like the way animals are treated, which is totally fair enough. I decided to put the blinkers on with that because I like meat and I think it's healthier. I'd rather not know because it would put me off too. But there is this overwhelming thing at the moment that cows are bad for the environment. Now, I don't have stats on me for this, but I do know from looking at this a little while ago, it's a really strange thing that all of a sudden we've been raising cattle for hundreds of years, but only in the last 20 years has it been destroying the environment because of their methane farts. It's not accurate.
Yeah, I don't know, but I would just think like off the top of my head that's due to population increase and then the more farming, right? The more farming of cows, maybe, if there is, if that's what the data is showing, you know what I mean? I ain't got a clue. I'm just going to ask you a question. So antioxidants, yeah? What do we get in plants? Vitamin E, vitamin C, beta-carotene, flavonoids, polyphenols, resveratrol, very good for the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, we can get antioxidants from meat, especially organ meats, grass-fed meats, wild game, if, you're game.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got the budget for it.
And, like what, anyone listening, everyone's heard of antioxidants. What does it do? Help neutralize, free radicals, reduce oxidative stress, protect cells from damage in the body, potentially reduce cancer, chronic diseases, brain health issues, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think, from what you know, what you're aware, so you think that a carnivore diet can give you enough antioxidants?
Antioxidants, yes. I'm not sold on the fiber thing entirely yet. I don't know in terms of long-term studies. There are short-term benefits of that. I don't know whether that, like, the research on fiber is really interesting because there's an overwhelming amount of research suggesting that fiber is unavoidably good for you. But there's also more emerging stuff that people having negative side effects. And like the carnivore diet, there was very little long-term stuff. So this is why a lot of this is like, oh, well, yes, fiber is shown to be good, but we don't know for sure if not having it is also fine. We don't know. Antioxidant wise, again, if you mention it, you hit it on the head. Organ meat provides a lot of stuff. I'd also say things like being carnivore adjacent, again, which is sort of my go-to. It's almost looking like if you mix the carnivore and the Mediterranean diet together, you probably get the best of the best of every world. And throwing in a little bit of fruit, throwing in a little bit of olive oil, coconut oil, things like this, you will probably cover most of your bases.
And that's that modified version, right? I mean, a big one is like vitamin C, isn't it? You know, we get vitamin C from citrus fruit, peppers, berries, other, like citrus fruits and stuff like that. I mean, animals can, like internally make that, but humans can't,
Yeah.
Like, how do we obtain it from the diet?
Well, I'm just having a look at this, right?
So,
because I literally just Googled their sources of vitamin C, right? And it came up with and if you do, because this thing with Google, right, it'll bring up top hits and often sponsored stuff, right? And I'm not going to put a tinfoil hat on, but we're having a bit of a vegan movement, and you'd be very, understandable in your thought that you could only get it from strawberries and vegetables and kiwis and things like this. But then I changed the Google search to source of vitamin C in animals. So if I'm going to go back. Source of vitamin C, it was kiwis, oranges, cauliflower, papaya, black currants, potatoes, kale, parsley, cicada plum. I don't know what that is. Sounds cool. Cabbage, spinach, cantaloupe, pineapple, tomatoes, strawberries, broccoli, peppers, sprouts, mango, lemon, cherries, grapefruit, citrus fruit, and guava. That's all they said. Yeah. Now, when I say, but if I go in animals, sufficient amounts of vitamin C can be acquired from fish roe, liver, and eggs.
Interesting. Yeah, very good.
So again, when we talk about sort of the benefits of eggs, and we're going to get me on this rant again of people saying remove your egg yolks. Don't fucking remove your egg yolks.
And this is it, guys, for anyone listening. Like, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Google, you have to double check your information because there's AI bias. You know what I mean? There's a bias. You know what I mean?
And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with getting vitamin C from the aforementioned vegetable sources by any stretch of imagination. But people go, well, you can't get vitamin C. It's like, well, you can. And like just look at the nutrients. And this is why, and again, I'll plug out Paul Saladino, who is, I'm actually getting the Carnivore Code book, by the way. It will sit there next to James Laval's book in a couple of weeks. But when we like look at some of this stuff, it's like he talks about chronometer, and he often puts his food into chronometer, and he gets more than enough of pretty much everything. Yeah, and yes, he's not strictly carnivore anymore, but use yourself. If there's anything you can learn from Brian Johnson, who I know is vegan, and we'll probably talk about him next week, is that it's not about the diet per se, it's about the data. Track it on something like Chronometer, then you'll have a look at your nutrient status, look at things like your sleep quality, look at things like how you're feeling, look at things like your gut health. If you want to go nerdy like Brian Johnson, get a glucose monitor on and see how that works. And like, if you can come to us and go, so Steve, I listened to your 2 episodes of the show, and I'm on a vegan diet, and I've got all my nutrients in, I haven't got a supplement in sight, then let us know. I want to be wrong. Let me hear this. What did you do? But I can't see it right now. And again, we're going to talk some good stuff about the vegan diet next week. This is a carnivore episode, but I think if there's a big thing that people can take away from the carnivore diet, it's that don't rule it out as bad. It doesn't mean that everyone should be on it. As you said, it's super restrictive. But like, if we start looking at the benefits of red meat, oily fish, eggs, and organ meat, we maybe find solutions for people that maybe don't want to go carnivore, but maybe don't like veg. Okay, let's get some liver. Let's get some eggs in, right? We can find more ways. If you understand nutrients, and this is the reason why, again, I'm plugging my bookshelf here. I've got The Mineral Fix by James, every time, DiNicolantonio, where it's basically a reference of where can you get every mineral. And like, I'm going to use that as a reference going. I'm not yet. It's on my list of things, but I'm at some point going to look through all of this and just get a bit more versed in. You'll find iodine in X, Y, and Z. You'll find vitamin C in X, Y, and Z. Because if you can do that, you got a client that comes to a problem. Rather than force feeding them the foods that you feel are going to be healthy, you go, well, here is an alternative. And I think if the carnivore diet does anything for us, it's to say, look, there are alternative ways to be on the surface, without any long-term studies, healthy. Or at the very least, you can plug gaps and in various ways, even if you're not strict on it.
So, yeah, and you know, like just for takeaway for people to try, you know, use that precision nutrition model for like elimination diets. Like, what's the first step would be just to maybe get some blood work, a simple basic blood panel done, yeah, and you know, fasting glucose, inflammatory markers, stuff like that. And then stage 2 is to actually the elimination phase, where whether you're strict or modified or whatever you want to do, yeah, whether it's vegan or this carnivore diet, give yourself what, like 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks or something. Give yourself a time and you know, short, and treat it like an elimination diet. And then, you know, eat what you're allowed to eat, be strict, and then that final stage 3, introduce something on day 1. See how you feel on day 1. Just introduce something. See how you feel. Day 2 and 3, don't eat it. And then day 4, if you felt okay, bring it in.
Yeah.
If you didn't feel good, don't have it. And then maybe 5, 6, 7 days later, a week later, try and do something else. Once you've settled, you know, your inflammatory response has settled.
I will say some anti things about the carnivore diet, because I realize I've been very, very positive. But the things I don't like about this diet on the whole is that you consume lack of fiber, which I've already spoken about. We don't really know long term. It's not a complete negative, because the lack of fiber, there are reasons to suggest that fiber is beneficial, but we don't know that lack of fiber isn't. So I know that sounds really weird, but it's not. We have more protein than we'll ever need. Great for satiety, may also not be good for digestion in certain people. And also, is it going to be the best diet to build muscle mass? Probably not. If you've got severe gut issues, yes, because before we add carbohydrates into your diet to sort of drive training adaptation, if we can't recover from training because we're already in a fight or flight response because our gut is a mess, then the carnivore diet is the perfect diet for hypertrophy, but it's not long term, right? Carbs are protein sparing, carbs are fuel performance, carbs will kickstart recovery, carbs are good for thyroid health, right? So this is a big disadvantage of the carnivore diet. A perpetual low carb diet probably isn't great for thyroid health, depending on where calories are. A caloric surplus carnivore diet might not be so bad for thyroid as a calorie deficit. But that's a big drawback of this. But the way I look at what we teach our students in SMU is I have a little spectrum. And this is the spectrum I have when you're picking an approach for diets. We've got the carnivore diet on the far left, which is good for people with autoimmune issues and gut issues and just sort of like removing stuff. Then we start to move into maybe a keto diet. Maybe start adding some vegetables that agree with them well. Then we can move into a vertical diet, which is Stan Efferding's diet, which is low inflammatory stuff where we're adding some rice and things like this.
Which I think
then maybe we'll go into paleo, right, which is a bit more like this. And then we can start moving into a normal low carb diet where it's like not quite as low carb as keto, but there is some carbohydrates in there. Then maybe do cyclical low carb where we do 6 days low, 1 high day. Then maybe we'll go train day, rest day. Then maybe we'll go train day, rest day, moderate day, like a carb cycle. And then maybe we'll just do high carb, right? And we look at our clients and I go, right, where are they? What do they need first? Maybe they need a bit of lower carb stuff to sort of get them healthy. But they're also an ultra marathon runner. Okay, well, maybe I start bringing them up towards high carb. Or maybe I don't, because from a performance perspective, I've been playing around with a couple of people that have done some long and distance stuff. I had a guy doing a triathlon recently, another person doing high rocks, and another person doing a massive ultra hike thing, right? They were all ready to ramp the carbs through the roof because that's what they were told was good for them. And I just went, let's test this, because it's really aerobic. Like, high rocks is a bunch of anaerobic activities put together to the point where it becomes so aerobic in nature because it's long, right? That well, let's just ramp the fats up a little bit more and just keep carbs moderate. Everyone's had a better performance. Yeah. So maybe going to a high fat, you might learn some stuff. Like, oh, maybe I didn't need as much. Carbs are important, but maybe not as much as I thought. And this is interesting, but it all comes down to that tracking component. So I think looking at this as a spectrum, and go, where does my client fit along this? And what's the good bits I can take from everything rather than zeroing on the negatives I can take from stuff? I think people will have a much better relationship with food if we look, this is why the carnivore diet's great. This is why high carb's great. And when. If I'm sat down in front of the sofa for 6 months working on my business, maybe I move down the carbohydrate ladder because I'm not active. But if I'm preparing for walking, length of Wales or doing like Ironmans on the regular basis, maybe that's when I start moving towards the higher carb route rather than seeing as a negative.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. And that's where it depends on goals, right? And an individualized approach to your nutrition and tracking the data is important.
Yeah, and as I said, like tracking is the thing, right? And I know I it's one of these things that I'm at some point, probably in the new year now, I'm gonna give myself a proper experiment, publicize on publicize it on YouTube and just sort of like go through my journey of not being a fat fuck again. Mm. But I'm going to start. I've got an Apple Watch here and an O-ring here that I'm not using very much. I want to get my bloods done. I'm probably going to get my food prep for me just to make it easy for a little while and just like properly test out the diets. Like almost Brian Johnson. I found a food prep company that can modify stuff. And like, what's great about food prep companies, if you can afford it, is it gives you so much consistency.
Yeah.
You're not reliant on you. If there's like the big thing I take away from Brian Johnson is that his food's prepared for him. His supplements are out ready for him. And like, if I can get a semblance of that, like I will trial some of this stuff. Like my approach for anyone who wants to know, and that's why I brought it up here, is going to be sort of like not a carnivore diet. There will be some carbs, but it's going to be a lower carb diet, moderate, like maybe like some carbs in my evening meal, maybe some carbs on my workouts, but on the whole, lower carb rest days. And it's going to be relatively high fat, moderate protein. And I'm probably going to go for a more Mike Mensa style bodybuilding approach. Now, I know the research is leaning towards higher volumes for hypertrophy, but I want to, I'm running a business and I'm not training as much as I want to train. So I rather than give myself, I'm going to change all that overnight, like the all New Year's resolution people and go, I'm going to do 6 days a week of training. I'm going to be like, well, let's just do 3 full body sessions, 1 set to failure per exercise, and then I can ramp that volume up. But that means I'm going to try and do it from the minimal amount of stress in my body. Let's have a diet that's going to bring stress down on my system, and let's have a diet that's going to bring stress down on my training, because this is the component we haven't met, right? We've talked about the carnivore diet as this good thing for autoimmune conditions and gut health. But if you're doing this alongside a bunch of high-intensity interval training and loads of like 6 days a week of weight training, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I'm saying that you might not be getting the benefit because you might be stressing this. You take the stress out the diet, but you might be adding stress in terms of the training. I have a client at the moment that has some thyroid issues. We've gone into a modified Mediterranean style diet with him, and he started the first couple of weeks, he was improvement so much on some of his gut health markers. And then the fats have started to drop again, and he's just not quite doing it in the same way. The calories have started to drop back down, and he's starting to get a few symptoms. So I've given him a refeed, 4-day high carb refeed. But the key thing I said is I want no cardio. And ideally no training for these 4 days, just to bring stress. And I just want to highlight that. It's like, it's more than just the diet. We're talking diets here, but like, if you're looking at an anti-stress diet, look at an anti-stress lifestyle.
Yeah, that's awesome. Gems there. That's cool. I look forward to seeing how you go with that.
I publicized it now, so I better do it.
If I can do it, bruv.
By the time this comes out, well, I'll probably be started.
Oh, yeah, cool, nice. That'd be good. It's interesting. That's good.
Yeah, if I've got to be an educator, I can't look too out of shape, can I?
Yes, you're right.
Right, man. So we're going to chat vegan diets next week. For anyone who wants to hear about your stuff, maybe because your YouTube is delved into some more nutrition stuff and some sleep stuff and some recovery stuff. It's not just. Look. I keep in touch. I'm subscribed, as all of you guys, by the way.
Thank you, boss. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm dipping into it all in it because I can't have just one particular niche, right? I need to diversify my audience. So yeah, dipping
So the
into it all.
handle being Stephen Collins Trading. Go follow him on YouTube and Instagram.
Indeed, yes.
And for me, it's Kingsley Dutton on Instagram and Simon Kingsley Dutton on YouTube, where we have regular podcast clips. I've done more on the shorts. I'm going to do more in the new year for slightly longer form, well, moderate form content, because everything on there's long form at the moment. But mate, I'm looking forward to doing the return of this and doing vegan diets.
Stuff. I'll see you next week.
Awesome.